Hi everyone, and welcome to the video presentation for Module 25. This is another example of fourth species counterpoint. And so a quick little review. Fourth species counterpoint deals with suspensions, and suspensions always follow the same pattern. You prepare the suspension by having a consonant interval. You suspend it over the bar line, and that suspension can either be a consonance or a dissonance. And then that suspension needs to resolve to a new consonance. So here's an example of a suspension. We have a perfect fifth, which is a consonance between the G and the D. So that's our preparation. That preparatory note, that preparation gets tied over to the next bar, and it becomes a suspension. And in this case, the suspension is a fourth, which is dissonant. So it needs to resolve down by step to become a third. And then that process repeats. So that third, that was our resolution, is now our preparation. That gets held over so that it becomes a second with the B natural. And then that second needs to resolve to a resolution, in this case, a unison. So they always go preparation, suspension, resolution, and they always overlap. The one rule to remember is that a dissonant suspension must resolve down by step to a consonant. So here's the example we used. That A octave is our preparation, which becomes a seventh, which is dissonant, which means it needs to resolve down by a step to become a sixth for resolution. And this is the challenge of fourth species, since this rule often forces the counterpoint to move in the downward direction, which means that you're limited by the shape that you can follow. So to counter that, we can take advantage of a consonant suspension, which does not need to resolve down by step. So in this case, we have a sixth as our preparation, which becomes a fifth, which is still consonant, which means it does not need to move down by step. It can move up to a different note. And that's often what happens. Since this is the only chance the counterpoint has to change direction, we often use consonant suspensions to change that direction. So they're usually, or often, a leap upwards. And just overall, the basic rules of this species: the first measure begins with a half rest. Every note of the counterpoint is a half note tied to another half note until you get to the cadence. And the second half note must be a consonance. The first can be a consonance or a dissonance. And unisons can be used anywhere in the species. And beginnings and cadences follow the same rules as the other species. All right, so here's our example for this video. And I'll go ahead and play this for you. But this is in the key of A. We want to follow the same step-by-step method we had before, which is to make a plan, which involves writing the shape, choosing the high point location, and writing the cadence. And then we want to choose our high point note and our first note. Then we want to compose the rest and do our best to stick to the shape that we want to follow. All right, so let's play this first and then work on writing the counterpoint. Okay, so first look at the shape of your given melody, your cantus firmus. Notice that it spends the first four measures going up to its high point. So the first four measures go in the upwards direction to our high point. Then we have the next four measures going downwards to kind of, actually its low point, the lowest, well, second to lowest part. Now, quick little turnaround, and then it spends the last three bars moving downwards to the cadence. So if we plan our shape, we want it to have a high point in a different location. And we can kind of put our high point maybe over here, far away from our cantus firmus high point. So we want to start by kind of trying to create as much contrary motion as possible. So we'll want to start by going in the downward direction if we can, which shouldn't be a problem for this species. We'll have to turn around eventually to get to our high point. And then we'll have to go in the downward direction to get low enough to end up with contrary motion at our cadence. So we'll kind of have a little wavy shape going down, up to get to our high point, and then down and then up to get to our cadence. Okay, so let's go ahead and write that cadence. So cadences look just like they do in second species. And in this case, the best option is to end on an octave A. I'll go ahead and erase our cantus firmus shape. We don't need it anymore. So we'll end on our octave A. Then we want to have our contrary motion by step, which means that the note that comes before that A is a G sharp. Now, sometimes you can write in the other note for this measure, but I'm going to actually leave it blank to give us a little bit more flexibility. All right, so we have our shape, high point location, and cadence. Let's do the next part, which is to choose our first note and our high point. The first thing you want to write is always a half rest. And then you want to add your first note, and the best choice is going to be an octave, which gives us plenty of room to move in the downward direction. And you can go ahead and kind of write the beginning here. So if you sustain that over, suspend it over, it becomes a seventh, which is a dissonant suspension. So that has to do something. It has to move down by step to resolve to a consonant sixth. Then that sixth is held over to become a fifth. And from that point on, you have some options, because a fifth is consonant, which means it does not have to move down by step. So you can kind of do whatever we want to do from that point on. Okay, so we pick our high point note. Now we can go over to where we want it to be and maybe choose the furthest we can have it from our canus firmus at that point, which will be a tenth away from this B, which means that we have to create that with the suspensions. We have to have a D before that and check that that is consonant with what we have in our canus firmus. So that's an octave, so that's fine. We can do that. So that'll work for our high point. Okay, so we did step one, we did step two. Step three is to compose the rest, trying our best to stick to the shape that we want to achieve. So we've already started to move in the downward direction. Now, if we kept going down, we would end up on an F sharp, which would be a fourth, which is dissonant, which you cannot have on the second half note of a bar. So if we wanted to keep going down, we could go to an E by a leap, and we can do that because we have a fifth. But if we do that, we'd have to suspend it over, and it would become a second, but a second that's below this F sharp. So that's not going to work either. So at this point, we really can't move in the downward direction. We have to move upwards. So maybe let's try to step upwards to an A, and that'll become a sixth, which we can suspend over to become a third with our F sharp, so that's fine. And from that F sharp, maybe we could try to get even higher up by going up to a C sharp. And so we can do that because this suspended note becomes a third. And when we leap, it becomes a fifth, which is fine. Suspend that over. So now that becomes a sixth, which is also a consonant suspension. And then maybe, we could go up to an E if we wanted to, but maybe to give us some variety, since we've moved upwards twice now, go downwards for a little bit here. So maybe our next note could be a B. And this B is going to be a fifth with our E in the canus firmus. Then we will sustain that over to become a sixth. And now we're almost there. And I think that works so far. And that'll be our high point. Okay. From this point on, we want to move in the downward direction to get us low enough to create contrary motion. Well, low enough to get to this G sharp, really. So by moving down, we only have so many options. We could step down to a C sharp, but that creates a ninth, which is dissonant, so you can't do that. So we could have another leap of a third down, which becomes an octave, which is fine. We can do that. So let's do that. That gets suspended over to become a seventh with that C sharp. Now that's dissonant. So that is a dissonant suspension, which means it needs to resolve down by step to become a sixth. And then that is suspended over to become a fifth with our D, which is consonant. And then if we want to keep moving down, we could go to, step down would be a G sharp, but that is a fourth, which is dissonant, so that's not going to work. So let's maybe leap down to an F sharp, which becomes a third against the D. And then we have a suspension, of course, which becomes a fifth. Then we move to the G sharp, that becomes a sixth. and there's our counterpoint. So let's play this whole thing, see how we did. Yeah, I'll play that one more time. Kind of nice. Okay, so there's our final example of fourth species counterpoint. All right, well, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, we'll be going over this one-on-one actually in our next session. So I will see you then, and have a great day.